Once you get AIs that are massively smarter than we are, we're in a domain where we're not going to be able to predict what happens. That is scary, but it probably won't stop the singularity.
The development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race.
2029, we get AIs as smart as people. By 2045, we have AIs boundlessly more intelligent. Whatever happens with this superintelligence, its mind state will be conditioned by the earlier AIs. What is AI mostly being used for on the planet Earth right now?
Drones, tanks, and automated gun machines could allow war to be fought on a scale greater and faster than ever before.
Selling, spying, killing, and gambling are the primary goals and values in the mind of the first superintelligence. I mean, we're not setting the best example in terms of the way human society is being regulated right now, nor the way we treat non-human life forms on the planet. What if the AI treats us the way we treat less intelligent animals? We want them to be more compassionate to us than we are to each other. The attitude of wanting to foster connectivity of all sentient beings is quite important. If we can get that attitude into our super AIs, we're going to be a lot better off. I want people to start deeply thinking and to start learning and studying and to be figuring out how they can best contribute, just as I've done in my own life. May you live in interesting times. It'll be even more interesting.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... Are machines taking over the world? Well, the simple answer is yes, and it's only a matter of time before we're going to have some type of relationship with AI, with cyborgs, and with computers. And my guest today, Dr. Ben Goertzel, is here to tell us that it can be done in a good way. But that's only if we can get back control of AI into the hands of private citizens. They're going to be able to put human values and human consciousness into these AIs. Because if we leave it in the hands of companies like Google and places like the military, it might evolve in a way that we will never, ever be able to control. And so I really love talking to Ben about this entire concept. I mean, people freak out when they hear about AI and the singularity, but most people think it's happening in 2045. And that means basically the machines are going to be able to develop everything in rapid time. They'll be able to create Nobel Peace Prize winning discoveries in 5 seconds. And it's only a matter of time before we're going to have to get used to these relationships that we're going to have with machines. And so I really appreciate Ben being on this show, and it freaked everybody out at London Real about what he was talking about, but the truth is, it is the future. So now is the time to be prepared and pay attention, because this is an incredible discussion about AI and the singularity with Dr. Ben Goertzel. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Dr. Ben Goertzel, the founder and CEO of SingularityNet and Chief Science Advisor for Hanson Robotics. You are one of the world's leading experts in artificial general intelligence, and you have decades of expertise applying AI to practical problems like natural language processing, data mining, video gaming, robotics, national security, and bioinformatics. As Chief Science Officer for Hanson Robotics, you were part of the team developing the AI software for the humanoid Sophia robot, which can communicate with humans and display more than 50 facial expressions. Today, you also serve as chairman of the AGI Society, the Decentralized AI Alliance, and the futurist nonprofit Humanity Plus. Ben, welcome to London Real.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, first of all, how is London treating you, and how does it compare to Hong Kong, where you normally spend your time?
London's been great. I always have a good time here, and I think, for AI and advanced technology, certainly London has a very long and deep traditions with all the universities and that have been doing advanced research for a long time. So it's a very, between London, Cambridge, Oxford, there's a lot of depth in the AI field, which is really quite interesting. Hong Kong, it's a little different. It's the gateway to China, and China doesn't have so much history in AI, but they're pursuing and funding it with energy like you've never seen before, right? So the amazing dynamism in Asia now. You go away for 2 months and revolutions have happened. I don't quite get that feeling here, but there is a great depth of thinking and experience in AI and associated pursuits here.
Right, and a company, DeepMind, that was bought by Google, was based here, right? And probably a lot of Cambridge and Oxford talent in that company, I guess.
DeepMind was based here, and actually one of the founders of DeepMind, Shane Legg, worked for me from '98 to 2001, like well before he came here he was at Kiwis from New Zealand, not British. So, yeah, I mean, DeepMind has been London's, I guess, biggest success in AI software realm, and they are basically a research division of Google rather than a sort of practical application engine like you have in many of Google's Mountain View teams. And I think DeepMind has recruited people from all over the planet. I mean, certainly not a preponderance of British people, but then, I mean, in the decades I've been visiting London, it's become more and more international. It looks really different than like 35 years ago when I was here the first time. So, but DeepMind is doing fantastic stuff. I think they're one of the few major projects to take general intelligence seriously and to really be pursuing thinking machines that can think, like people can, or even more imaginatively and creatively and broadly than people. It's a bit unfortunate to me all this great talent is sort of sucked into the proprietary firewalled domain of big companies. I'm more an advocate of an open and decentralized mode of development of both applied AI and artificial general intelligence, which is what we're doing with our SingularityNet blockchain-based AI platform and with OpenCog and open source general intelligence project. But the quality of work in DeepMind is very, very impressive, obviously.
Yeah. It probably crosses over to what you do a little bit more than some other just pure tech plays, but yeah.
It does, although, Facebook has Facebook AI Research Lab. They've got an amazing team in Paris working toward AGI. Baidu and Tencent in China are doing a lot of interesting things. So I think DeepMind is awesome. Their lead over other corporate AI teams is perhaps not as great as the media would lead you to believe. Like they've done a really good job of PR as well as a good job of research. And
they did the Go stuff with the game Go and a few other things.
Which is sort of not necessarily material to Google's business, nor to their R&D on general intelligence, but it's been amazing in terms of bringing them into the public eye, and it's great stuff. Like my oldest son he's doing his AI PhD, but he's also an experienced Go player. And I remember a few years before AlphaGo, we were looking at the research literature on AI and game playing, and we're like, someone's going to beat Go. Like the techniques are there now. There's techniques in academic publications. Computers are faster. We even thought of focusing on it, but then, I mean, it's a big project. It takes 12 people, a few years, and we don't have the spare change for that. Now, I'm sure the guys in DeepMind are looking at the exact same academic research papers my son and I were and thinking the exact same thing, but then they have Google's resources, so they could pull the trigger on it. But that's cool. I mean, there's a lot of companies with a lot of resources, and most of them they're not identifying amazing things like that to do, right? So.
Yeah, so that's a plus. Well, look, I'd love to get into like a lot of your work today and where you think we're going with AI, things we need to look out for. I was just thinking today, right before I sat down with you, that in 1989, I started as a freshman at MIT, and I remember
that's the year I got my PhD. Actually.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
I remember there was this thing called Project Athena there, which was the very first like email, and they gave us an email, and the only person I could email was my brother at Stanford because...
You could have emailed me.
I could email you.
I got emailed that same year.
Really?
The last year of my PhD at Temple University in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And yeah, my last 6 months as a PhD student or something.
Got your email.
We got email addresses, and yeah, there weren't a heck of a lot of people to email. Then a year later, it was really useful, right?
Yeah.
It spread like wildfire.
Yeah, it was really clunky back then. But also, I don't remember anyone talking about AI at MIT back then. You know, the internet
Marvin
didn't exist.
Minsky was there before that.
I'm sure he was, but I'm saying it wasn't part of the general conversation. You know, like I said, the internet didn't really exist yet, so it was still kind of a bit of more of an old school tech. Sure, there was computer science and double E, and I was in mechanical engineering.
AI was obscure. Yeah, I mean, I got interested in AI due to science fiction in the early 1970s, but then when I looked at, as a kid, when I looked at what was really being done in the AI field, it was pretty boring, right? It didn't compare to the science fictional visions, but it kind of grew gradually. You remember Douglas Hofstadter's book, Goertzel, Escher, Bach, in the late 70s, that sort of layout AI and what we would now call general intelligence, and it went through, you know, consciousness, cognition, abstraction, all the key ideas talked about in AI now. So that, I mean, and he was professor at University of Indiana, Bloomington. So I think it was sort of a slow burn in hindsight, but there was profound work on AI going on in US, UK, Germany, Russia, Japan, you know, since 1950s, and in some ways back to the 1930s, and it was sort of going on in the background. And you know, if you talked about general intelligence or building machines that could think like people or building Mr. Data from Star Trek, you would get laughed out of the seminar room in a university. So that the AI work that was going on was real and it was making advances, but it was not ambitious compared to the broader scope of AI that you'd see from science fiction or Hollywood movies. Now, in the last 5 years, things have changed dramatically, right? I mean, narrow AI that can do highly specific things for certain applications, narrow AI is everywhere and it's key to every major company or government strategy. And AGI, artificial general intelligence, while not yet fully realized, it's taken seriously, right? You can give a seminar on it. You can even talk to a CEO about it, and they'll be thinking about like how will they adapt their business model as narrow AI gives way to AGI, right? So it's amazing the transformation that we've seen in the last 5 years regarding AI, and I think it's mostly just a few practical applications that have caught the public eye, and then that triggered a sea change in sentiment.
And those practical applications, is it like the robotic stuff?
Face recognition.
Face recognition.
A lot, right? Because then, I mean, not only can governments use it to surveil all their citizens, but I mean, you go on Facebook, you see, you know, everyone's picture is automatically labeled. Everyone can see that. It's there all the time, right? And I mean, autonomous driving, it's amazing. 10 years ago when I told people, you know, pretty soon all cars will be automated, everyone thought I was nuts, right? And then 2015, DARPA driving Grand Challenge, you saw cars and trucks driving themselves through the desert. Then the Urban Grand Challenge a couple years later, like all of a sudden, it became obvious. Everyone's like, well, yeah, of course, automated driving will happen. It's just a matter of time. So a few things like that, face recognition, automated driving, then AlphaGo, Jeopardy, these things, everyone can observe the AI doing things they thought only humans would be able to do. And this seemed to have triggered a sort of global change of mind where people are now over the threshold and they've realized, well, if AI can recognize faces, drive cars, and play Go, what is the limit actually going to be, right? Which was obvious to me from like, I don't know, 1973 when I was 5 or 6 years old, right? But I guess if you don't have the right cast of mind. You need to see very palpable examples to understand what's going on.
Yeah, so this is exciting times right now. Or what's the famous Chinese proverb? May you live in interesting times.
May you live in interesting times.
And this is it right now.
My whole life has been interesting times in one way after another.
Right,
so,
but the next 10 years will be the most interesting time of your work, probably.
It'll be even more interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, even after that will be even more interesting because we'll get brain plugins and we'll fuse our minds with the super AI and get a trillion times human intelligence.
All right, well, I want to talk about that and 3D printing our babies, which we were talking about earlier. And I want to talk about some terms just so people get up to
You want to buy some 3D printed babies?
I mean, are you selling them?
How many do you want?
All right, we'll talk about this. And I want to talk about singularity, blockchain, all this other good stuff. First off, a lot of people know like some big heads in Silicon Valley that have their AI thoughts and they throw them out there. So, I mean, I could be wrong here, but I think you got kind of the Elon Musk school that says like the AI is really dangerous and we have to look out for it. And maybe you got the Peter Thiel school that says, no, it's going to be okay and they're going to be our friends. And, you know, of course, two of these guys run massive companies with massive amounts of money behind them. What are some of the scenarios that we've heard and what's right and what's wrong in your opinion, just to start off in a general way for people that maybe haven't thought about this as much as you have?
I would say what people think about super intelligence, AI that's a billion or trillion times smarter than human beings, says more about the people doing the speculating than about the reality of what's going to happen. Because we're talking there about a future that we truly cannot predict in detail. There's an irreducible uncertainty, just in the same sense that a cockroach will have a hard time predicting who's going to win World War II. Like, I mean, once you get AIs that are massively smarter than we are, on a rational basis, we're in a domain where we're not going to be able to predict what happens. And what I see is, in Asia, where I've lived for 8 years, the predominant feeling and assumption is that AIs will be friends of humans and will help humans and everything will come out well. Whereas in the US, the prevailing vibe has often been more paranoid, like, oh, the AIs are going to kill everyone, they're going to be the Terminator, they're going to take all our jobs and we'll be left rummaging in the garbage or something. And I don't think this has to do with differing, like, rational extrapolations of technology to the future. It's just different emotional mindsets, because when you're dealing with the radical unknown, the most convenient thing is just to bring to it whatever your emotional bias is, whether it's cooperative as in Asia or paranoid and adversarial as in much of the US, right? And there's an irreducible uncertainty there. You can find that exciting, you can find it frightening, you can find it both. It's still going to be irreducibly uncertain. And I mean, Nick Bostrom here in the UK at Oxford, he's been very vocal that superintelligence is potentially dangerous. And it is, but the thing is, Nick, who I've known a long time, I have a lot of respect for him, but he has a way to make it sound like superintelligence is probably going to kill everybody. But I mean, we don't know that. If you read his book, Superintelligence, all he really argues for is that that's possible. Like, we can't rule out the possibility that the superintelligence will just turn us all into extra hard drive space or something, right? And you can't rule it out. So there's a certain irreducible uncertainty. We could decide, okay, well, let's just stop developing all this advanced tech until we somehow come up with a theory that will let us reduce this uncertainty. I personally am guessing that will never happen. Like, you could, even if we pause development of advanced technology for 10,000 years, I don't think something with an IQ of 200 is going to be able to predict what happens when you create something with an IQ of 200,000. I think that there's an information theory problem there. But the other thing is, if the US and UK decided to pause development of AI technology, China certainly isn't going to, right? If China did, Vladimir Putin certainly isn't going to. He's on record saying whoever solves AI first will be the most powerful in the world.
Do you agree?
Yeah. And I think...
And this is happening, whether it's 10
happening
years
now.
or 50 years.
That's the thing. So then the thing that we really should be worrying about, not so much the irreducibly uncertain phase when there are super AIs. I mean, we can think about that and how to bias things in a positive direction. But what happens in the transition period? Like, let's suppose my good friend Ray Kurzweil is correct that 2029 we get AIs as smart as people. By 2045 we have AIs boundlessly more intelligent than people. Suppose that vague timeline is sort of correct, right? What happens in the interim, right? Like, how does that affect industry? How does it affect our economy? How does that affect our lives? Because my best guess is whatever happens with the superintelligence, its mind state will be conditioned by the earlier AIs that we've created that grow into that superintelligence.
Does everyone share that opinion?
No. Some people think that superintelligence is just a whole other different thing, right?
Because like part of me thinks that 10,000 years from now, the superintelligence will just do whatever it wants to do, even if Ben...
Well, it may 10,000 years from now, but the worry is more the transition, right? So imagine like the transition from hunter-gatherer to agriculture, or the transition from not having language to having language, right? Now, of course, the first people to invent language, those cavemen could not foresee differential calculus, Shakespeare, and the internet, right? And programming languages, whatever, right? Of course, they couldn't foresee those further developments. What they could maybe do is smooth the transition for their children and grandchildren, right? And so that's really what we're talking about here. Of course, a superintelligence will go in directions we can't comprehend and we can't foresee. For that matter, it may contact alien life that's like humming all around us, embedded in the vibrations of subatomic particles that we're too stupid to detect. You have no idea what's going to happen.
Right.
On the other hand, that doesn't mean it's irrelevant to think about, like, okay, I mean, I have 4 children and 1 granddaughter. I don't want them to die or be reprocessed into, like, fuel for the superintelligence or something. I want them to be able to grow up and flourish and take advantage of new technologies that AIs help people develop, right? So it's still meaningful to think about how to smooth out the transition to the radical unknown.
Okay.
And I think it's a plausible hypothesis that the initial value system of a superintelligence may be conditioned by the value systems of the earlier stage AIs that we create. And then toward that end, we can think about what is AI mostly being used for on the planet Earth right now. I mean, it's selling, spying, killing, and gambling, basically, right? It's, I mean, advertising, surveillance, military, and then stock market trading and so on. So if selling, spying, killing, and gambling are the primary goals and values in the mind of the first superintelligence, I mean, is it very likely we're going to have, you know, a benevolent transition period? Or should we be, as well as working on general intelligence research, which I've been doing for decades, should we be working on making sure that early stage general intelligences are doing things like, you know, education, childcare, elder care, scientific research, mental health counseling, you know, decision support for governments. Like, we want the early stage general intelligences to be doing benevolent things in cooperation with a broad swath of humanity, so that the mind state of the first superintelligence is positive and benevolent, rather than the first superintelligence being preoccupied with spying on people and selling them crap they don't need.
Right. And you say mind state because these in artificial intelligence, they will have some type of, I hate to say the word, consciousness.
I believe so.
All right.
I mean, there's philosophy there that's not resolved. On the other hand, there's philosophy that's not resolved in our everyday life. Like, I can't prove that you, according to science, rather, as opposed to some philosophy or spirituality anyway, I can't scientifically establish that you are conscious.
Correct.
And not just some meat machine put here to entertain and annoy me, right? I mean, that's, so,
yeah.
But yet we go about our everyday life and we make laws about who it's legal to kill and who it isn't legal to kill. And I think it'll be the same way with AIs initially. Like, we don't have a well-grounded philosophy of consciousness, but we just have to, we have to keep operating anyway, which we do in our everyday lives. And my personal belief is that AIs are going to be conscious in roughly the same sense that people are, but I do think that as AI and brain-computer interfacing and quantum computing, as other technologies advance, we're going to gradually work toward a real science of consciousness, which will be quite interesting. I mean, I think we're going to find that any AI that has human-level intelligence is going to have some species of advanced reflective consciousness, but I mean, I'm open to other possibilities. Maybe we'll discover only quantum computers can be conscious,
right?
And digital computers can't. I doubt it, but if that's where future science leads us, then so be it.
Do you foresee like the machines, I'm talking like a Terminator movie, the computers having like an evolution maybe like humans did, where they have like the Dark Ages and the Renaissance and the cultural revolutions as they go through their own evolutions of consciousness?
I think human evolution and human cultural evolution have had many very different characteristics, and you'll see with AIs, because humans are distinct individuals with our brains trapped in our heads and communication only by language, which is very low bandwidth, whereas AIs can swap brain matter whenever they want to. They can join into Borg minds and then subdivide whenever they want to. So it's going to be more like one big AI mind network. Okay. Rather than a bunch of AIs in competition. It may start as a bunch of AIs in competition because the human world works that way. But as the AIs get more and more power, I'm suspecting they're going to sort of grow beyond...
Just bypass us.
They're going to bypass that way of doing things, because in the end you can have more intelligence and more understanding, and you can create more stuff by joining minds together than by being opposed. And humans feel that way too, is the thing. Like right now, what's the main thing we use computer technology for is to be constantly SMSing each other and video chatting back and forth and live blogging every time we fart, right? I mean, so once you have a brain implant that lets you thought SMS other people, like every 12-year-old school child will be thought SMSing each other all day while they sit in school. Like human beings also take every opportunity to join together with other humans into a sort of greater group intelligence. We just can't do it as efficiently as AIs will be able to.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean there won't be ups and downs, but it's different. A, because AIs can join into group minds flexibly as they want. B, the AI can save its state of mind and reboot, right? Like if human culture actually has lost information, they've burned libraries, right? And even we, as we get older, we may lose some understanding or ability we had before. If you're an AI, just save it all in the hard drive. You can reload it whenever you want, right? So or you can make copies of yourself and let each of the copies evolve in different directions, right? And then some of them may blend in with other ones. So I think we can't too closely take the history of humanity as a collection of largely distinct individuals communicating by language. We don't want to take that as the model for how AIs are going to grow. I mean, in a very broad sense, the principles of evolution hold, but when you don't have individuals that are separate and then get old and die and can't back up, I mean, you're going to have a very interestingly different kind of situation. You know, it's going to seem insane to us 30, 40 years from now that we lived all this time without the ability to make backup copies.
Right. Well, so tell me,
or to fork yourself, like, hey, what would it be like if I, sat in the mountain and meditated for 10 years? Right now, you have to give up your life to do that. What if you could make a copy of yourself and let it do that? Right.
And then check in on it later.
Yeah.
So let's talk 40 years from now or 50 years from now. What could that look like? You're talking about brain implants. You're talking about me digitally printing some kids, or you selling me some kids. But like, what's something that we should just accept now that could be a reality?
I think once we have a technological singularity, meaning AIs are much smarter than people.
Okay, can we define that singularity? What is that?
Singularity is defined as a point when the rate of technology advance is so fast that from a human point of view, it appears infinite. Like say that the AIs in the global brain network are making new Nobel Prize level discoveries every 5 seconds, right? And what's going to come along with that is, molecular nanotechnology, where you can just build anything out of molecules the way we would now out of Legos or in a machine shop, and the ability to cure human disease and prevent death by just sending little bio-nano probes into the body to fix things, and 3D printing that solves material scarcity on the level of everyday human needs. So I mean having all these technologies coordinated together is going to be a fundamentally different regime of life than we have now.
That's mind-boggling. I mean, to me, to think
that's
about.
That's just the beginning.
And that happens every 5 seconds.
The thing is, this is the focus on the external machinery. But if you think about your state of consciousness, imagine that you had, access to reprogram anything in your mind whenever you wanted to. So you're like, well, I wish I didn't feel like eating so much junk. Okay, let's load the patch. Don't want to eat junk. Ding, you're done, right? Well, I wish I wasn't attracted to this type of girl. Okay, ding, I'm attracted to that kind instead. Like, I'd like to be able to, focus fully for the next 5 months on this. Okay, let's load the focus patch. You can do that, right? So the ability to rewire your brain at will, mental illness of the kinds we're familiar with now are gone. Unhealthy relationships are gone unless they're specifically what turns you on, right? So
that's assuming the machines let us survive. Then we have these options.
Well, yeah. So what I think is going to happen is we'll each have 2 options. So option A, you fuse your brain into the super intelligent mind matrix, then you become part of something billions, trillions, quadrillion times more intelligent than you were. On the other hand, probably you lose your illusions of individual self and free will and your nostalgic attachment to your human memories. And
your body, you lose your body as well.
You lose the requirement to have your body. You could have your body, but if you can see through a billion bodies at one time, this one body becomes arbitrary, right? I think that's one interesting option, and there's a question of how fast you want to fuse with this supermind. If it happens in 1 second, or do you want to phase it gradually over a year or something, right?
Hopefully that's your choice.
Who knows?
And then why have new humans if we've already got all these?
Well, that's one option. So now, option B is remain in a form very similar to the human form we have now. Get rid of death and disease. Get rid of mental illness. No need for scarcity, because instead of just a dishwasher in your house, you have a 3D printer that will print you any physical object you want, be it food or a new bicycle, whatever it is, and you live in a human life of joy and abundance.
I don't know if the joy is there, but we'll have the abundance.
Well, the joy
everybody will get more depressed.
The joy will be there, because if you don't feel joyful enough, you will just load joy patch number 3.7 into your brain.
Ben, even that sounds a little ridiculous.
You will feel that's not ridiculous at all.
Isn't that synthetic joy? Isn't the human experience all about overcoming difficulties and dealing with a
my second son Zebulon had a quote which was, "Pain builds character, bad character." So I would say humanity has a lot more scope than what we normally understand. The states of
caveman mentality, you think, where?
Well, it's just particular, right? The states of consciousness we enter into, they're different than the ones that people in Stone Age societies had. Very, very different. And they're different than the ones a monk meditating in a Buddhist temple has. And, they're very different than the mentality people will have in the future era of, human abundance I'm envisioning. I think the brain is capable of a lot of states of consciousness beyond what we enter into on an everyday basis. Like if you could experience what the average guy in the UK in 1350 was experiencing day to day, it's going to be very, very different than the way.
Okay, but without the social media, he's still got to eat. He's got kids. The sun comes out. It won't be that different, will it?
Well, it depends on how you're looking at it. When you're looking at it like joy comes from struggling and overcoming struggles, I mean, they may not think that way at that point. I don't think that's a necessary part of human physiology, because like I talk to people who say, well, death is what gives life meaning.
You don't believe that?
I mean, you can derive meaning from anything. Human mind is wonderfully flexible, but I think if we don't have to die, suddenly we'll find other ways to derive meaning that don't involve dying, right? There's a lot of ways to derive meaning, right? Other than through death or through suffering and then feeling the suffering go away. Now, it might be that there's some certain minimum level of pain and discomfort that's just intrinsic to the human experience. My feeling is we habitually experience much more than that minimum level right now, because where do you stop? Like you go to the Middle Ages. I mean, it's not that like half your kids would die as babies, right? I mean, very high percentage of women dying in childbirth back then, right? And mostly your teeth would rot by age 40. You'd have a toothache in your mouth all the time because there was no dentistry, right? And so you could look at the way people lived in the Middle Ages and say, well, suffering is intrinsic to life. It's just natural that half your kids die as babies, half the time your wife dies of childbirth, and you have a toothache all the time because all your teeth are rotten. But now we look at it and we're like, no, that's totally unnecessary, right? So I think a lot of the suffering that we take for granted as part of life now will seem totally unnecessary. The thing is, humans in that era, they'll be human because they choose to be human, because otherwise they could fuse with the superhuman AI mind matrix. They choose to be human for their own aesthetic reasons, essentially, and why not? I mean, I don't think every dog or bird should become a human just because we're in a way more generally intelligent than they are, right? I mean, every creature in the ecosystem has some beauty and integrity to it. Humans do also, right? It's not like we're morally bound to uplift ourselves to become superhuman AIs and give up our humanity. The thing is, the humans will be like the squirrels in the national park are now, right? They're carrying out, the squirrels in the national park are carrying out their lives, and we who take care of the national park don't intervene in their love affairs or their hunt for acorns either. On the other hand, there is a world outside that park which they can't understand, and if they run out of it, they may get run over by a truck.
And that's the metaphor for what AI and the singularity brings to humans.
Well, either the squirrels can upload and join the people and become super intelligent, or they just remain the squirrels in the park.
Okay, hopefully I have that option. When do you think the singularity is coming?
Ray Kurzweil says 2045. So I'll stick with that. It's
26 years.
Yeah. It could be sooner, could be later, could be 2030, could be 2070. I don't think it's 2200. I don't think it's 2020.
It won't be 2030. It's too soon, right?
I don't know, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess when it starts to happen, it happens real fast.
Well, that's sort of the point, right? Like so suppose that as a thought experiment, like suppose in 2025, Google DeepMind or my own AI team in SingularityNet and OpenCog, like suppose by 2025, one of us manages to create an AI that is essentially as smart as a human being, right? So it can hold a conversation like a human being, and it can prove math theorems like a human mathematician. It can analyze a biology data set, right? So and
a bit like your robot, Sophia.
And you put it in a robot body. I mean, that's a separate problem. It could operate many robot bodies all at once, right? But unlike Sophia right now, it can really understand what it's seeing and what it's doing fully at the level of a human can. So suppose you get there, like how far are you from a true singularity? Because this AI can then copy itself. You can make 1 million of those, right?
Improve itself.
Yeah, right. Because you can, once the AI is as smart as a human, okay, let's teach it computer science. I mean, we can send it to school. It can learn math. It can learn programming. It can learn hardware engineering. And then you can copy 1 million of those, right? So all 1 million of those, maybe half of those are working on improving its own intelligence, but they're not working in isolation like humans are. They can share thoughts directly because they're all just running in the compute cloud, right? So it seems very plausible within a few years of getting to that human level AI, it's going to invent all manner of amazing new things. I mean, it doesn't mean it'll be instantaneous. I mean, doing lab research still takes time. Building new hardware still takes time. But of course, it can be working on how to speed that up, right? Like how to more fully automate manufacturing and laboratory research. So yeah.
And then it could take us out of the process as well, possibly.
It could. I mean, that depends on the value system that the AGI has, right? And I mean, this is why it's important to, give values of kindness, compassion, tolerance, inclusiveness, love for all sentient beings. We want to get these positive values into the AI as much as we can.
And we think we can program that into AI.
I think you teach it.
You teach it.
You program it with the ability to learn that.
But then won't it unlearn that if it doesn't suit it? Or that's what we don't know?
I mean, it's very subtle because human values are a moving target, right? Like the values of suburban New Jersey in 1975 when I was in elementary school are not the same as the values in suburban New Jersey in the US right now. Like, I mean, back then, gay marriage was illegal and violently opposed by almost everybody, right? And racism was very rampant there. So, I mean, human values they're evolving all the time. By the values of medieval Europe, you and I and probably almost everyone listening to us deserve to burn in hell forever, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't, if you gave the AI exact human values from 2019, then by 2050, it's going to be horrible. It'd be like having a dictator with the values of 1950 America or something, right?
Right.
So you want an AI that will have evolving values in a way that somehow respects the ongoing evolution of human values,
and that hopefully still respects it and doesn't just make its own.
Which is very subtle, right? So some of my friends who are vegans and animal rights activists are like, well, what if the AI treats us the way we treat less intelligent animals, right? And you think about it, like we care about extinction of species, though. I mean, not as much as we should, but in general, we don't want to extinct entire species of subhuman animals, but we don't care much about one cow, sheep, pig, or wolf more or less, right? We care about like the genome, right? So if you took that analogy, the AI, it would like to keep humans around, because I mean, we're the creators, we're the ancestors, we have our own unique aesthetic value. But by that analogy, it may not give a crap about one human more or less, any more than we care about one wolf or pig more or less, right? So
we didn't keep the Neanderthals around.
No, but we weren't as reflectively intelligent then as we are now. And I think that there is an argument that as human cultures advance more and more toward abundance and away from scarcity, there's more caring about the environment. There's more compassion toward non-human animals. I mean, there was a lot in Stone Age society, and it sort of went down in the Industrial Revolution, and now it's certainly going up again. But I guess the point is, we want our AIs not only to be super intelligent, we want them to be super compassionate. Like, we want them to be more compassionate to us than we are to each other, because we're killing each other. Humans are killing each other for no good reason all the time, right? So we want them to be morally better than us in some sense, right?
And we hope they are.
Yeah, we're not on the whole, we're not setting the best example in terms of the way human society is being regulated right now, nor the way we treat non-human life forms on the planet, nor the applications that we're deploying AI toward. Like, what are all the AI PhDs working on? What are all people's data being gathered together toward, right? I mean, it's, again, selling, spying, killing, and gambling. Right.
So this is one of the big things you talk about, in that all of the AI resources now are pretty much in the hands of companies and defense industries.
Quite a lot.
Okay, that have their own agenda for it, which is, what did you say? Killing,
selling, spying, killing, and gambling. Yeah. All the good stuff in life, right?
You say that with a smile, but it upsets you.
I mean, day by day, I'm enjoying life, right? and what's disturbing is this is all being done by 99% really good people, right? Like the people working at Google, I know a lot of them, good-hearted people. They're trying to make a sustainable business, right? And you know, I worked in DC for 9 years doing AI consulting for various intelligence agencies in Washington, and you know, the amount of nasty terrorist plots that are squashed by U.S. intelligence agencies is amazing. Like so many lives are being saved by the various three-letter agencies in Washington, and almost everyone I knew there has a really noble attitude, and you know they believe they're saving civilization from destruction. So it's mostly good-hearted people trying to do good for the world, but yet the way society is organized, the way governments and corporations have emerged to be organized,
through capitalism.
Yeah, well, through however you want to describe the modern oligarchic world economic order, right? I mean, it's large international corporations cooperating with governments. I think of it more as corporate socialism than competitive capitalism.
Okay,
but,
why do you call it that?
Well, because large corporations largely control the laws of large countries, right? And so if the laws of countries are being modified so as to make life easier for multinational corporations, then in a way it's a kind of socialism, but the benefit is for corporations more than for people, right? Right. I mean, the vision of capitalism as a sort of level playing field where companies are competing in a meritocracy, it's not really what you see in the world. Particularly at something like mobile, there's a limited amount of bandwidth. Who gets the bandwidth? Well, that's determined by government in cooperation with big companies, right? I mean, the internet, who sets regulations for the internet, right? So I think things are so cross-connected now that it's not like a fruit market out in the street or something where you have some free market and competition. Right. You have humongous companies with trillions of dollars.
Well, they're now monopolies and oligopolies, right?
Yeah,
so
and they have a lot of lobbyists, and they're getting politicians elected, and they're sculpting the laws. And I mean, in some ways, it works incredibly well, right? And I think there are some things these big companies do great, like the mobile phone or something, right? A little startup isn't going to make that at the present time. It's really hard. You have all these different pieces. They have to be built by different subcontractors, right? So, I mean, large corporations certainly have their place, and, you know, intelligence organizations have their place because there are psychotic people out there, and there are nasty organizations that want to kill a lot of people, and that's sort of how the human brain works, right?
So good-hearted people, smart people, developing this AI, but they're doing it for a lot of times the wrong reasons. And
yeah, because of the way society is organized, right? It's the incentive structure, and you know, there's the whole question in the U.S. of whether corporations are people, and that's a legal question, but it's also sort of a philosophical question, because a corporation in a way is its own organism, right? Like, no one controls it. If the CEO or the board try to direct it in the wrong way, they can get thrown out somehow, right? And so it's its own organism, and they're sort of like parasites on humanity in a way that are directing humanity in certain ways. And I think, but there are opposing dynamics also, right? So, and the internet is quite fascinating that way, because the internet is not owned by anyone, it's not controlled by anyone. Because of that, like, Iran is still on the internet in spite of all these crazy international sanctions. Mobile developed in more of a corporate way, and you can think about, like, if the internet had developed like mobile has, and every time you went from one country to another, you'd have to pay some insanely high roaming fee just to use the internet, right? But it didn't, right? Now, BitTorrent, largely used for illegal purposes, but it's interesting, like it got rid of huge companies. It disrupted industries quite rapidly through enabling file sharers. And, you know, for academic publication, academic publishers are going to be mostly obsoleted by Sci-Hub and LibGen and like peer-to-peer sharing of scientific books and papers. So these sorts of things show that there's a peer-to-peer decentralized mode of interaction
that gives you hope.
Can have a disruptive power. And Linux you can look at similarly, right? I mean, Linux, open source. I had a lot of arguments about that in the 80s. People are like, that'll never succeed because people need to be paid to do their work, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know, what happened is open source it interpenetrated with the capitalist economy. A lot of people are paid to work on open source software, right? But open source has huge advantages, right? And I mean, that's enabled the whole robot hacker ecosystem to come about through Raspberry Pi and other Linux-based maker kits. You know, you have Android is running on Linux, and because of that, you know, if the U.S. government goes apeshit and says like Huawei can't use Android anymore, well, most of it's open source. Huawei can use most of it. They just have to put a different layer on top of the base of Linux, which is in their phones, right? So I mean, and most servers on the internet are running Linux, which means that, you know, Iran, North Korea, China, anywhere can run all the servers using Linux. So it gets you away from corporate politics, it gets you away from intergovernmental politics, right? So we see things like Linux, BitTorrent, Sci-Hub, LibGen, now Bitcoin and Ethereum and the whole crypto economy.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Internet. So all these are peer-to-peer things which are owned by everyone and no one. And so this is one dynamic, whereas the increasing centralization and oligopolization is a different dynamic. Both of these are being enabled and encouraged by computing and communication technologies, and they're in like co-opetition with each other, right? They're opposed, but yet they're also supporting each other in various ways. So it's quite complex ecosystem.
It is. So what's your take on Bitcoin and the blockchain? I know you use the blockchain in a lot of what you do.
I mean, smart contracts really are the way to create, you know, a world computer and an internet of value. So I think the business world of the future, say 10 years from now, is going to run on smart contracts. It's going to run on strong encryption and on, you know, peer-to-peer based consensus mechanisms. So the core technologies underlying blockchain are going to pervade everything, just like the internet has, just like object-oriented software has, right? Now, whether the exact current technologies of Bitcoin and Ethereum and so forth are going to be dominant, I mean, I don't know. Fundamentally, it doesn't matter too much, right? My best guess would be Bitcoin will keep going as a store of value, much like gold and silver have, right? I mean, they don't have to. I mean, we could get rid of gold as a store of value, and so what? There's other things to put your money into. But maybe Bitcoin will keep going similar to that because there's a community that wants to keep buying and selling it, right? But I mean, that's interesting if you're an investor. And I mean, I own some Bitcoin and Ethereum. I'm not selling it. I'm holding it for the long term. But fundamentally, what's more interesting is that the core technologies underlying Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other blockchain systems now, I mean, these core technologies, they're going to pervade everything in business, and that opens up a lot of new potentials, and it opens up new potentials for centralized surveillance and control, as well as new potentials for, you know, decentralized peer-to-peer networks that bring a lot of people and resources together to achieve valuable goals without any centralized controller. So they open up a lot of new doors. Like the Chinese government loves blockchain. I mean, because it gives an amazing way to, you know, keep records in a trustless way across a humongous government with 7 different layers between the people on the top. Like if you want to make sure there's not corruption happening at various intermediate layers of the government, I mean, what better way than have every transaction every government agency does put into, you know, a blockchain?
So they're doing that, or do you think they will?
They're doing it.
They are, okay. And you like blockchain for your stuff because it's public.
Yeah, I mean, I think for SingularityNet, what I want is to have the world's AI developed in a way that is not controlled by any single party. So then anyone creates an AI, they can put it out there on the internet, put it on their own server, put it on a server farm, put it on their phone, whatever it is. Anyone can put their AI out there, and then these different AIs, you know, they can all talk to each other, they can outsource work to each other, they can share data. If someone needs some AI task done, they can put a request into this peer-to-peer AI network and find someone who can do what they want. But there doesn't need to be an Amazon or Google or Tencent or any central controller supervening over it, any more than there's a central controller over every computer in the internet, right? There isn't, right? So that's SingularityNet platform enables this sort of decentralized AI network, and blockchain is a key part of the infrastructure that allows that, because blockchain allows a bunch of participants in a network to make decisions about operations of the network, like is a certain transaction valid or not?
Right.
Is a certain person who they say they are? It allows the community of participants in the network to decide that in a communal way based on the majority vote, rather than needing like one central controller who validates the validity of things happening in the network.
Now that makes sense. I keep thinking about chips in my head and 3D printing kids. So can we just talk about that briefly? So say the singularity happens at 2045. And the point is even if it's 2045 or even if it's 2095 or 2295, the point is it's going to happen, right? And most people will agree it's going to happen, right?
I don't know if most people on the planet will agree it's going to happen, but it's going to happen anyway.
Okay. Regardless. What does this look like? I got chips in my head. I'm 3D printing kids. Like, what? Explain to me, like, what does that life look like?
Oh, I think we're going to have a lot more choice over what that life looks like than we do right now. And there's going to be a lot more diversity of what different people's lives look like, right? So I mean, because virtual reality will advance. So I mean, one possibility will be you just give up your body and upload yourself into a computer. You could just live in various virtual reality video game type worlds, right? And
For
then
eternity.
Yeah, exactly. It could be whatever game you want, right? So that
sounds almost like
so that's one option. Now another option, I mean, just like we have the Amish people now who live in Pennsylvania in the US, and they don't like to use electricity very much, and they farm and they maintain the old-fashioned traditional lifestyle by choice. And they're very thoughtful about which technologies they choose to use at which point in time. Like they realize cell phones are valuable for saving lives in certain purposes. So they discuss, okay, we'll have phones, but we'll keep them turned off most of the time, and we'll only turn them on in this context and so forth, right? So I think there will be people who want to maintain a traditional human lifestyle, and just like the Amish now want to maintain a traditional, you know, farming lifestyle similar to US from the 1800s. And my hope is those people will be allowed to do that also. So that then you could get a lot of different communities which have sort of different rules about what to do, right? You can imagine some who are really retro and they don't want you to 3D print babies. They want you to make them the old-fashioned way, right?
Right.
You can imagine others who want to maintain regular human form and go about doing things in the biological human world, but aren't hung up on use of advanced technology within that context. But then, I mean, if you imagine, say, London was like a human preserve, right? So people who wanted to remain in their human bodies and living sort of human-like lives, rather than uploading into video game worlds or fusing with the superhuman AI, what would London look like in that context? Well, no one has to work for a living anymore, so there's no more there's no more offices and jobs, right? Because stuff that you need can just be 3D printed and provided to you, and you know the tube can run automatically, controlled by AIs. You don't need people operating it. So then what? 3D printing babies, of course, there's limited space in London still, right? So, I mean, if people don't die, there would have to be some limit on producing new humans, or all the space gets filled up, right?
So who makes those rules? Because like you said, Putin said whoever creates the AI rules the world.
I will say this is London. It's still a democracy at this point.
Is it?
So that should be democratically...
What if Russia develops the AI and then it rules the world? Then maybe this isn't a democracy.
By this point, there will be AIs that are vastly more powerful and intelligent than human beings. So I would view the democracy in a future human London like this, sort of like the student council in high school or something.
Doesn't mean anything.
I mean, well, it means something to the students, right? And
so they're basically our overlords. The AIs are overlords.
Yeah, but they're very chill overlords. Like they don't care. There's no reason a super AI is going to care about regulating the details of human lives.
No reason.
Why would it? I mean, I think...
Why have us around?
Well, that's a different question, right? So, I mean, consider like the squirrels in the park or the ants in your backyard, right? Like, if you want to put up a new house, you may bulldoze over those ants to put up the house.
Yeah.
And just because you don't care that much and they're in your way, and that's one thing. But there's you have very little interest in choosing which worker ant gets to mate with the queen ant, for example, right?
Yes.
You could, but it's not really worth your time. You're dealing with other stuff, and you don't have a lot of interest in which ant lives in which hole or something, right? So I think this scenario where AIs want to enslave people or interfere with the minutiae of human life, I think that those are very unlikely possibilities. I think there is a plausible possibility where AIs are just much smarter and more intelligent and better than us, and they treat us the same way we treat squirrels or ants, right?
Okay.
Which is
not the best. But we have a consciousness. So we leave some on natural parks. I mean, some.
Yeah. We don't want to
farm.
extinct those species, but we're not.
But that's because we have a consciousness, and
we have a conscience, and we have
organic
we
biology.
have conscience. We have some morality, but not that much.
Have that necessarily.
It may have more than us.
Maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
Ours is not that strong in the end, as you can see in the human world around you. So I think there's a set of possible realities where the AI wants to help take care of humans out of love and compassion and nostalgia, right? And there's this gratitude for creating it. And there's a set
that'll get old after a while.
There's a set of realities where the AI is just indifferent to humans. And both of those need to be thought about. I think the set of realities where the AI is malevolent to us or wants to enslave us or meddle in details of human affairs, that just seems extremely remote and unlikely. I think in the short term, though, in the shorter term, worrying about nasty humans using somewhat intelligent AIs to enact their nasty humanity on the rest of humanity, this is a real worry, right? Like, how about in the period before you get a superintelligence, you have AIs that are around as smart as people, but not in every way, but they can still do a lot of powerful stuff and act semi-autonomously. I mean, this is where you get into like robot army territory, or like robot cyber army that hacks into the power grid. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could imagine nasty national leaders in one place or another using AIs that are like early stage AGIs to do nasty things
with like robot armies and
robot armies or software on the internet, right? Or AIs that design nasty bioweapons and additives put in the water supply. I mean, there's a lot of imagination you could use there, right? Because, I mean, this is where AGIs are smart enough to be kind of adaptive and autonomous in how they obey your commands, but they aren't yet powerful enough to overcome their human creators. Like, so, I mean, what if some advertising company or mobile phone company or combination of the two was like truly taken over by the intelligence division of some dictatorship, right? And then was doing much more than like influencing people to vote for Trump using fake news on Facebook, but was really like using the video games that you're playing, say using the brain implant you have for Google search by thought to affect the way you're thinking, right? And what if you had an AI that was really smart in understanding the human brain and human motivation, that was like a super advertising agent in the hands of some nasty dictator, right? There's a lot of things that at the intermediate level, I mean, of intelligence, where the AI is still being controlled by people, that are maybe more worrisome, right?
All right,
So,
and what do we do about that stuff? Because that's kind of scary.
That is scary, because you see now, like, who's running the most powerful countries in the world are not necessarily the most compassionate and benevolent human beings on the planet, right? And even something like Bitcoin or Ethereum, which are created by mostly good-hearted anarcho-libertarians, I mean, arguably, various mafia organizations are controlling large bits of the Bitcoin and Ethereum ecosystems, right?
Is that true?
Yeah, it seems. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Is that recent or?
No.
Oh, really? Last couple of years?
More.
Longer
than that, yeah.
Because they can move money illegally.
I mean,
or legally.
Right now, cryptocurrencies are a good way to launder moderate amounts of money, right? I mean, if you want to launder billions of dollars, it's not good.
You got to use your local bank,
Yeah,
international bank.
Right. If you want to launder tens of millions of dollars, it's probably. I mean, I'm not rich enough that I require that service at the moment, but it seems to be an effective way to do things.
And that's an example of tech being used for bad intentions. And the same thing could happen with AI.
I mean, money laundering is good or bad intentions, right? Because, I mean, there are people in Iran who don't have bad intentions, but they're restricted from moving money due to, international tensions that have nothing to do with them, right? It's the religious government there versus the government in U.S., and it's not their fault, and they didn't get their money by doing anything immoral, but they still want to transfer money out to business partners or family members or something, right? So, yeah, the same tools that are used for good ends are used for bad ends as well, and that's always the case. But yeah, I think there's a lot of dangerous possibilities out there, certainly. And I mean, you could imagine. I mean, one thing I worry about is, as automation advances, right, then the need to have less educated human beings carry out work may disappear rapidly, right? We already see that with like long distance truck drivers will be obsoleted. We'll see fully automated McDonald's around pretty soon. So in the more developed world, I think we're just going to see some form of social welfare become prevalent, whether it's a universal basic income or some similar mechanism. But who gives universal basic income to the average citizen of the Central African Republic, for example? If there's no need to outsource labor to the developing world, then what happens? I mean, yeah, you can come and dig up their minerals and take them straight from the mine to the port, and you can pay the dictators of those countries for what you mined. But what about the average people there, right? So then, of course, you can say they'll remain subsistence farmers, but then you have a really two-tier world economy of people in the developed world living on universal basic income or else developing the advanced technologies. So there's already a huge class division in the developed world between like the 20% of the population that's helping to create the singularity and the 80% living on the dole.
Right.
But then you have the developing world, which has no dole,
and
they're just living as subsistence farmers, but they can't afford medicine for curable diseases, right? But yet many of the young people there, they have the internet, they're getting technically trained, they know what they understand advanced technology pretty well, but they're not allowed to immigrate to the developed world. So what are they going to say when some say Russian mafia guy offers to pay them to do cyber warfare and hack into the power grid in the US or hack into the missiles in China or something, right? I mean, their whole country is being screwed by the international balance of power and technology. So then, then what happens? Like, at what point does some first world country decide to exterminate everyone in that third world country, right? So you using drones that go in there and like gun down everyone seen with a laptop or something, right? I mean, there's a lot of dystopic potentials you can think of when you put together income inequality with military and surveillance technology powered by AI. And when will you see military and surveillance technology used to preserve corporate profits rather than just national security, right?
Well, some say it's one and the same now, right?
It's very closely allied, and especially if you look at Africa, it's super closely allied, right? So,
why Africa when you see it? Oh, just with minerals and what
we're
extracting.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, because it's just deals. It's deals between one government and another.
Yeah,
that are made in order to assure companies with rights to mines, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it works.
I had a Navy SEAL in here. His name was Jocko Willink, and somebody one time said, "Oh, you're just part of the military-industrial complex. Don't you worry that the people you kill is just there to support the industry." And his frank answer was, "Yeah, it's what makes America great, our military and our industry, and I'm there to go do whatever it takes to make us great." So that was his kind of response, which is all one and the same to him.
And China has been, in some ways, subtler and more humane about it, right? I mean, they have been developing Africa for the last couple of decades because the West didn't want to.
Is that why?
Pretty much. I mean, we had we're too busy blowing up innocent Arabs to mess with Africa.
Like China's
right?
investing in the resources of the future.
In a way. I mean, there's light rail in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and the train there has the logo of the Shenzhen Metro on the side of the train. I mean, it's just a Shenzhen Metro car plunked there in Africa. But, that's all done with debt financing. So the Ethiopian government owes money to China for this. If they can't pay it back, then there's always a bargain to be struck, right? So China is they're using businessy methods rather than military methods to secure leverage over developing countries. And I mean, that in a way, that's just doing what America used to do and Western Europe used to do, but smarter, right? They're being very judicious about it. And the average Africans love them because they're building trains, they're building highways. However, if you notice, the best highway and train line always goes straight from the mine to the port, right? And I mean, it's not a coincidence. And a lot of the profit from this development in many African countries goes straight to the Swiss bank account of the ruling family rather than being distributed among the people. And they're also putting factories there now, though. So you look in the outskirts of any big African city, I mean, there's people assembling shoes, they're assembling mobile phones, they're doing the final assembly of parts made in China and Southeast Asia for sale in Africa. The thing is, what happens when that's no longer economical, when it's easier just to have the automated factory assemble the whole shoe? Well, the Chinese companies they're capitalist first and foremost, right? then they'll just have the robot factory in Vietnam assemble the shoe and ship the shoe to Africa to be sold, rather than having Africans work on making it, right? But then how do the Africans get the money?
So the transition to the singularity is going to be ugly.
Transition to the singularity doesn't have to be ugly, but it looks like it may well be ugly. It will be ugliest in the developing world, and how that will spill over, I don't know. Like the current issues with immigration are just scratching the surface. It's going to get way, way worse than that once automation renders outsourcing labor to the developing world totally irrelevant.
Okay. And you have offices in Ethiopia.
We have an office in Ethiopia, and I've traveled extensively in Africa. And it's fascinating because, you know, the young tech geeks of Africa, they're just as good as the young tech geeks in Silicon Valley, Beijing, London, or anywhere. And they're really part of the global economy. And they're doing outsourcing work for foreign companies from home, or they're emigrating and sending money home. But that's a little portion of the population there, right? And you've got all these people like my age or 10 years younger than me, and they've been subsistence farmers forever. They're devoutly religious. They really are not prepared
for the singularity.
They're not prepared for the singularity by any means, and they're still part of an economy that's primarily subsistence farming oriented. And yeah, but their kids are seeing, like, my relatives are dying of curable diseases in their home village because they don't have enough money to get modern medical treatment. And these kids understand advanced technology quite well, right? So there's serious ethics issues here, which may turn into serious, like, cyber warfare initiatives, right? And then are the dictators of African countries prepared for the subtleties of the transition to the singularity? The leader of Ethiopia actually is. I mean, Abiy Ahmed, he has a software engineering degree. He understands advanced technology. But that's not the majority case in the African continent.
This is a bit like when people had to adjust to the Industrial Revolution.
But it's faster.
But faster, and
that's the problem.
1,000 times more.
Yeah, right. I mean, that was ugly too.
Yeah.
And was ugly in Africa too, but it unfolded over generations, whereas now it will unfold within a single generation.
And it's happening. So
it's happening, yeah.
It's going to happen. I think most people walk around and don't think this is happening yet, Ben. Do you get that idea? I know you go to conferences, you're at the transhumanists.
That's like the parable of the frog in the pot of boiling water. Like, people don't think the singularity is happening. Meanwhile, they're video chatting with their friends all day, and they're using Alexa to get music, right? So bit by bit, they just accept what happens, and then when their self-driving car drives them around, they'll be like, cool, more time to play video games while sitting in the passenger seat, right?
I mean, we do have an implantable device in our brain. It's just not implanted yet. It's the mobile phone, right?
Right. But people take for granted what happened already, and they adapt pretty quickly, and in a way that's a good thing, right? I mean, so yeah, people may never feel the singularity is happening because it's just step by step, right?
And then it just happens, and you don't know any different. And it's
if it happens in a benevolent way, I mean,
it's just progress. Yeah,
the AGI isn't gonna, like, forcibly mind upload everyone all in 2 hours or something, right? I mean, it will, just due to the inertia of human society, the only really ethical way to roll out advances in human society is a little bit gradual. Anyway, I mean, people take time to adapt to things, right? So certainly you'll see faster and faster the change than we have now. But there's sort of an upper limit to what people can absorb, right? So if we rule out disaster scenarios, it's going to always feel a little bit gradual to the people involved, I guess. Just like, you know, you can get a new phone every 6 months, but you couldn't get a new one every hour because you don't have time to learn all the features, right?
Right. Okay. You do some work in the robot industry.
Yeah.
Should we be thinking or fearing, you know, robot armies and, you know, T2-like scenarios.
I don't think the robot armies, I don't think robots that look like people, like marching into your city and gunning you down is the most likely scenario, but I think automated weaponry is part of every major country's vision of the future of combat, right? And so there can be a combination of drones and things that roll, and some things that walk, and surveillance cameras that are everywhere. I mean, it'll be a combination of many different technologies. But yeah, I think we should be worried about surveillance and surveillance apparatus being hacked by the enemy too, right? Because, I mean, there's already cameras a lot of places in London. They're not networked together as well as they are in China, but they will be, right? So you'll have like central repository of video camera feeds from every street in London right now. What happens if some enemy of the UK hacks into that system and then uses it to control drones that fly around in the street and do nasty things to whatever people they want to get rid of, right? I mean, there's a lot of possibilities there. Probably the physical form factor of the Terminator marching down the street isn't usually going to be the most effective way to do things. There are some cases where it could be.
Right, but some version of weaponized.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to happen. And I mean, the extent to which that plays a real role in world affairs is not very clear at this point. I mean, at the moment, it seems more like it's, you know, drone-based warfare from the air, and then surveillance apparatus just telling human cops where to go and what to do, right? And
yeah.
I mean, so you can, but there's going to be a lot of possibilities going forward. The thing is, even if there's a human cop in the loop, the question is, how much does it matter, right? Like if it's an autonomous self-driving police car, and if the weapon the cop is holding has some AI override or something, and that there's automated surveillance systems in everyone's apartment building and even in their house, which are telling the cops what to do, how much does it matter that there's a human guy made of meat, like holding the machine gun and sitting in the passenger seat of the self-driving police car? I mean, he's being told what to do by the infrastructure anyway. We're hung up on whether there's a human making like the kill or do not kill decision, but humans are terrible at making those decisions anyway, right? I mean, humans I don't know the UK that well, but in the US, I mean, human cops seem to make decision of who to kill or not based on race above anything else, right? I mean, it's not like having a human in that role, right, among all the automated and IT systems makes a lot of a beneficial difference from what I can
keep
tell.
Playing all these bad sci-fi movies through my head, Ben. Do you have a tendency to scare people when you talk to them? Or do you usually make them feel optimistic?
In the West, in Asia, everyone's optimistic. Westerners are just paranoid. I don't know why.
You live in Hong Kong.
Because the West is like an empire in decline, and Asia is like an empire rising.
Is that why it is?
So people there are more optimistic.
Is that why it is?
Well, I think at a gut level, like everyone in China has had the feeling of getting richer and richer every year. Like
because they are.
30 years ago, China was a very poor country. If you look globally, like 80 or 90% of everyone to move from poverty to the middle class is in mainland China. They've done an amazing job of like urbanizing the rural poor. So, I mean, people there, like, they didn't have a car 5 years ago, now they do. They didn't have a phone 5 years ago, now they do. They didn't have a refrigerator or air conditioning, now they do. So they just see things getting better and better. And so the natural gut feel is robots will probably make things better and better.
Okay.
Whereas in US and UK, people, even if their lives are getting better and better by many objective material analyses, that somehow it's not the vibe that many people have. There's a little more of a worried and paranoid vibe for psychological and cultural reasons.
It seems out of control, I guess is what it is.
It's a bit weird, right? Because people's lives are improving a lot, actually. I mean, mobile phones are tremendous.
They're improving,
and
but the singularity is such an unknown that you understand why people would be a bit freaked out.
I guess, but in Japan, people just assume robots are going to be their best friend. They're not freaked out.
What's it like to live in Hong Kong? I know your wife's from mainland China.
I love Hong Kong.
You understand China probably unlike anyone else here or in America, and you also spent time living in America.
Yeah.
What are some misconceptions about China from the West? That it's not democratic?
I mean, first of all, Hong Kong is very different than the mainland China. So I mean, I live in a rural village with like wild animals all around, right near the beach, and it's very pleasant, sort of rustic type of place, really. But yet, I'm a 30-minute drive from the center of Hong Kong, which is amazing, like bustling financial center. So that's just Hong Kong is to me is mostly about beautiful nature, which is not how many people think about it, and that's the legacy of the British colonization. Really, there's no city in mainland China which has left so much beautiful nature right next to an urban area. So I'm grateful to the British Empire for that, for being amazing at land management and nature preservation. But yeah, I think China, Westerners, they have a huge misconception that the people in China like feel deprived of freedom and lorded over by some fascist dictator. And in China, people are just focused on, I mean, the people that I know, which is a subset of the Chinese population, which is mostly two sets, I guess. It's relatively educated people involved in the tech economy. And then I know people in my wife's home village in Anhui province who are rural farmers, right? But they're Han Chinese rural farmers. So I don't have a lot of friends like among the Muslim population in Xinjiang province, where a lot of unpleasant things seem to be happening, right? But among the segments of China I have anything to do with, people are very nationalist as much as in the US. They believe China is the best country in the world and things are better off there than anywhere else. They think the government has pluses and minuses, but overall they're happy because it's been making China, richer and richer for their whole lives. And China is the most capitalist country on the planet. So I mean, the people there that I know are mostly concerned with how do I make more money? How do I start a new business and make it successful? And very family oriented. Like, how do I take care of my parents and my kids? And they are not focused on politics. They would rather not think about politics or deal with it at all. They don't see the government as very intrusive into their lives. The thing is, the Chinese government, they want to support capitalist and entrepreneurial activity. They want to support people having, robust, happy, and healthy family lives. As long as you ignore politics, it doesn't feel heavy-handed in any way. If you try to do political organization, or if you put, like, in Chinese language, something on the internet that's against the government, then you'll run into some unpleasant things from the Chinese government, right? But as long as you avoid that, which most people there are very willing to do, then very comfortable life, rapidly increasing wealth, and a really healthy entrepreneurial ecosystem. Like if you want to do a software startup, there's probably nowhere better on the planet than Beijing. If you want to do a hardware startup, there's nowhere better in the planet than Shenzhen. Now, in my wife's home village in Anhui province, there's not a lot of tech people, but so many people have made themselves rich with like real estate remodeling or property companies or something like that. So I don't think people understand how capitalist and entrepreneurial the whole vibe in China is, nor how nationalist the Chinese are, like really believing and feeling like they're on top of the world, right? And like historically, 5,000 years, most of which they were more advanced than the rest of the world. They had a few hundred years of being backwards, and now they're taking their rightful position at the top again, right?
That's interesting.
So
more capitalistic than America.
By far, yeah, sure.
Explain that.
Well, Americans are fat and lazy and comfortable, right?
Fat cats.
Chinese are like
hungry.
Yeah, they're hungry and they're rising. But I think Chinese have been merchants and capitalists since forever, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's really that's in the cultural DNA to a huge extent. And Deng Xiaoping in the 1980s, when they started communism and capitalism with Chinese characteristics, that was way more of like a quiet revolution than people outside China realized. Like it wasn't formally a revolution, but I mean, it was an utter change in the way things are, the way things are organized. It's really what's happened there since the 80s is really nothing to do with Maoism, even though Mao's face is on the money. And I think people think China is communist in some way they can understand, but it's not about that anymore. It's a new form of government and a new type of like state-directed capitalism, which we just have no model for in the West. And one of the beauties of that system is, they're able to plan 5, 10, 20, 30 years in advance in a very coherent way. Whereas in electoral democracies, which I still prefer emotionally being an American, but in electoral democracies, it's hard to do planning beyond the election cycle, right? And that's a problem. China is into AI, they're into solar power and renewable energy, they're into robotics, they're into nanotech, and they're able to plan these things decades in advance in a coherent way. And that's a very significant advantage, right? China is run by engineers, whereas the US is run by lawyers, and the UK is run by morons, right? Well, US is too, right? Which is a problem though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so Xi Jinping, very smart guy, and he's got like a whole organization of smart engineers around him who are like figuring out the optimal way to design the society, and what disciplines do the universities fund students to be in, which state-owned companies and which disciplines get money. So, in Guangdong province now, in many parts of China, if a real estate developer wants to develop a new office complex, there's strong pressure from the government to have a couple AI, robotics, or advanced technologies in that office complex. So this pushes the property developers to fund AI companies, so they'll have an AI company in their office complex, right? So the government just does all sorts of...
It's probably not the most efficient use of capital, but it gets their agenda
Yeah. So
pushed.
they're very complex. It's 1.5 billion people. And there's still corruption and there's a lot of inefficiency there. But the government is very clever at figuring out, like, within the system we have now, how do we nudge things in the direction that we need to go in? And it's not as top-down as you would think. So like this mechanism I just described now, on the one hand, there's some inefficiency. On the other hand, it's encouraging, the holding companies that own property funds to be thinking about AI, and then it pushes the AI investment local in that sense, right? Okay. So it is very subtle, but the thing is they're embracing AI, robotics, nanotech, renewable energy, biotech, all these things in a huge way that the West can't even imagine. And they're putting a significant percentage of GDP into these advanced technologies, whereas the US is like fussing about building border walls, and UK is like fussing about how do you deal with tariffs after a no-deal Brexit or something. China isn't chasing its tail around in circles like that. China is thinking like, how do we dominate AI, nanotech, biotech, and robotics 25 years from now, right? And so it's different, right? And
is that scary?
It's both exciting and unnerving, right? Because I mean, I'm sort of an anarchist, hippie, libertarian type. I have a great emotional preference for a system like the US or UK or Hong Kong is now, where like I could go out in the street with a megaphone and say the president sucks balls, right? And I'm not going to get put in jail,
right?
And I can publish whatever book I want. There's no censors, right? So I grew up with that in mind. I greatly appreciate it. It makes me more comfortable. Having parts of the internet blocked when you're in China, I mean, that's very annoying to me. doesn't affect me personally because my mobile phone has a Hong Kong SIM card, and then you're not blocked in China, actually.
Okay.
But I mean, just the concept kind of rankles me, right? On the other hand, if I look at it more objectively, I mean, you know, Brazil, where I was born, has not been remotely as effective at lifting people out of poverty as China has. And you know, if you're living in the favelas in Brazil, in some hut without proper electricity and with no education, you know, how good is it that you can go out in the street with a megaphone and denounce the president, right? So, I mean, there's been a lot of advantages to the way that China has developed. And if you compare China to India or Brazil, it's not clear you can say, like, you wish China had been with a more Western style system like India or Brazil. Like, arguably China has done better for its people in spite of some aspects that are annoying to me as like an upper middle class educated person, right?
Yeah.
So that's quite subtle. What I would like to see is AI develop in open, decentralized global networks, though, right? Because then you're cutting past all these issues. It's like, yeah, China has its pluses and minuses, US does, like UK does, Africa does. Every government system has its pluses and minuses. Iran has its pluses and minuses. Great university system there. And you would like AI to develop like the internet or Linux has developed in a way that cross-cuts across all these problems. Like, I don't want to get involved in politics anywhere. I want AI to develop in a way that is orthogonal to politics and that just networks together, you know, companies that need AI to do practical things and developers that want to develop AI. And I think we can do that. Like, we're developing our SingularityNet platform in a way that works in China and in the West, respecting laws about blockchain in the different places. And, you know, we're working with major Chinese companies like Ping An and some other big insurance companies there. We're working with Guangdong province government. I mean, at the same time, we're working with smart cities in France and with Domino's Pizza in Malaysia. So
what are you doing with Domino's?
We're optimizing pizza delivery in Kuala Lumpur. So after creating this decentralized AI platform, among other things, we've created a for-profit company called Singularity Studio, whose purpose is to develop products that back end on this decentralized AI network. And I mean, we're selling these products to companies in China and in the West. So, I mean, business has a way of cutting past all these nasty political problems. There are limits. I mean, Iran is hard to do business with now as an American, but China, all this madness with Trump hasn't affected us, right? Because I mean, they've blocked certain roads, but there's a lot of other roads for collaboration open, and there's no limitations on selling AI software into China. SingularityNet is a Dutch company, right? So we're a Dutch company, headquarters in Hong Kong. We can do business in China, the US, UK, France, wherever. And I think building up more and more AI collaboration with business projects built on open source software at the foundation with decentralized networks as part of that infrastructure, I think to the extent we can do that, then we're building up AI in a more decentralized, participatory way, which can maybe cut through some of the nasty dynamics that you're seeing. Because one of the interesting things we found is most corporations don't want to see Google, Facebook, Alibaba, Tencent own everything either, right? Like if you're a major like manufacturing company or an insurance company, you don't want to outsource all your AI to Google or Tencent, right? Because then they'll try to own your business in some way. You'd rather see some open source decentralized network become prevalent, because then you're on an equal playing field with every other corporation, right? So
but the Googles and Facebooks would rather you not succeed at what you're doing.
Well, yeah, Facebook is trying to own remittances now, right?
What do you think of that?
Facebook Libra.
What do you think of Libra?
My prediction is as follows: Libra will succeed reasonably well, like WeChat Pay has, right? Which is Chinese remittance system integrated with WeChat, probably the world's best social network software. So Then Facebook will get remittances integrated with Facebook Messenger and WeChat, which will get some uptake, will be interesting. Then you're going to see some horrible hacks and privacy scandals, which Facebook seems bad at avoiding. You're going to see some developing world countries try to clamp down on it because they don't want all the financial data from their country going into Facebook's databases and not theirs. And probably as a result of that, you're going to see some fundamentally decentralized cryptocurrency-based remittance system come afterwards as the next phase after Facebook Libra. So I think in the end, it will get some adoption, some bad things will happen, you'll have some abreaction against it, and finally you'll see like a decentralized cryptocurrency-based payment infrastructure come about. So,
but it'll help that process along.
I think it ultimately will. Just like I ultimately think you're going to have a decentralized Facebook instead of Facebook. You'll have some social networking platform that isn't owned by a big company, but it's just sometimes humanity needs to go through that learning process, even in ways that might seem obvious to some of us beforehand.
Right. You think we're living in a simulation right now, and we're just talking about this as uploaded beings?
I think we have no idea what is the fundamental basis of our reality, and I mean that's the bottom line. The idea that we're living in a virtual reality simulation that's in some way analogous to a video game seems highly unlikely to me, but I think that's kind of a lack of imagination, really. But I mean, the idea that there is some reality outside the reality that we know about, probably there is. We're probably very ignorant. I mean, I think about my dogs at home when they watch me sitting at the computer. What do they think I'm doing? Like I'm guarding this physical object. I'm wiggling my fingers to get some exercise. They have no idea what I'm doing there, right? I'm just sitting there. They have no idea I'm controlling vast networks of computers halfway around the planet or communicating with other people by text or something. I mean, in the similar way, when you get an AI much smarter than human beings, it's probably going to perceive aspects of the world that are totally opaque to us due to our limited scope of cognition, right? And we're going to discover the universe is something utterly different than what we think it is. But the odds that it's a simulation or a video game seem very low. It's going to be something we can't even imagine now.
Wow. And are you going to live forever or upload your consciousness?
I certainly hope so. Yeah. If not, I'm counting on my kids to figure out how to reincarnate me, right? So,
and are you going to digitally print any kids or 3D print any kids?
I would. We'll see how things eventuate, right? It may be that virtual realities become more interesting, but there's certainly that possibility. Okay. I would love to see, if there's resources, it would be a lot of fun to have millions of clones of all of us and let them all diverge in many different directions, right? But this may happen in virtual worlds rather than in the physical-based reality.
Right, so we just got ourselves in the virtual world and all these weird clones of us.
I mean, the process of raising a kid is partly wonderful because of just the biological constraints on it, right? It's not clear that 3D printing kids is even going to seem worthwhile. To me, I mean, I've loved having children. It's one of the most rewarding parts of life, but it really is, I mean, it's sort of bound up with the whole traditional biological way of being, right? I mean,
which gives our lives meaning, right? Well, we think.
It does give our lives meaning right now, but there's probably a lot of other ways to derive meaning in the universe also. Like I would like to fork myself into multiple copies and let one remain biological and keep producing kids in the good old-fashioned way, which has its rewards also, and have another version of me live in the virtual world where it can take any physical form it likes, and another version like give up its humanity and merge with the superhuman God mind. Like you're not limited to just one future you. You could make many copies and let them do many different things.
And then you're in 3 different realities, and you communicate with each other or not.
You can, but it would be interesting because the version of you that uploaded to become one with the superhuman God mind may be evolving at 10 billion times the speed of the human version of you, right? So it won't necessarily have much to say to that human version. Like between each word the human version said, there would have been like billions of years of subjective time by the superhuman mind version that would have drifted off in some totally different direction, right? So the thing is I hope to live long enough to experience all this. I'm sort of at the cusp, I think, right? Because I'm 52, so if we really get the singularity by 2045, I'll probably be around by then. I'm in reasonably good health.
Right.
Far from guaranteed, right?
25 years?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So my parents are in good health in their mid-70s. I should still be around then, but you never know for sure, right? And on the other hand, if the singularity came in 2070, which is what my father predicts, right? Then, unless we get some radical medical advances, I'll be dead by then. On the other hand, we're looking at a strong potential of radical medical advances, and those could occur even before a full-on singularity. So I think whether you and I survive to see all this is going to depend on the specific rate of advance of various technologies that are currently under development. But I mean, my kids, my granddaughter, who's 14 months old now, they're going to see the singularity unless something really unfortunate happens, which is amazing.
Right, and that excites you.
It does, yeah.
And that's assuming we don't screw it up and set off some nuclear missiles or something.
We're going to screw up a lot of things, and if some nuclear missiles are set off, that will be tragic, but it probably won't stop the singularity.
Right.
I mean, I think you could kill off billions of people without stopping the singularity from happening. I'm really hoping it doesn't go that direction, but yeah, we can't rule that out when you look at the idiocy at the highest levels of government in many places in the planet right now.
Yeah. What didn't we talk about?
Well, we talked about a lot of different things, didn't we? So,
are there things that are on your mind these days, like when you go and travel around the world and you talk to people that you want to share, or things that people ask you, or just, any other thoughts about when people hear you talk about this stuff? What's the general consensus or reaction to it?
I think I tend to speak, in terms of public speaking, to fairly special audiences, right? So, I mean, to people in the technology business world, or in the AI research world, or robotics world, I mean, they're very excited by these developments overall, right? And then, we're spinning off all these initiatives from SingularityNet. We're spinning off Singularity Studio for enterprise software. We're spinning off a project called Rejuve to use AI for life extension biology. A project called NewNet that lets you use your mobile phone and other like Internet of Things devices for AI processing. People are very excited by all these options. They're excited by, Hanson Robotics in the next couple of years, mass manufacture Sophia-type robots to be in businesses everywhere. But yeah, I think I'm conscious this is a very selected population. Like if I talk about these ideas to, say, rural Ethiopian farmers or something, there's a lot more confusion about all these possibilities and what they're likely to mean. But what's interesting is if you talk to farmers in like rural Sichuan province in China or rural Ethiopia, you find people are really eager to have AI help them solve the problems of their lives. So I went to Sichuan province, and we're looking at how can AI help do early diagnosis of crop diseases. And I mean, the farmers there, or the coffee farmers in Ethiopia, they would love to have AI to tell them earlier when their crop may be getting a disease, so they can be more judicious about when to apply pesticides and save money and not buy them when they're not necessary, right? So I think there's a lot of openness all around the world now to AI helping to resolve practical issues that people confront in their lives, even by people who don't want to deal with the idea of the superhuman mega God mind singularity taking over everything. And so I think that's probably what you want to focus on when you're talking to ordinary people. I think the people I talk to also in the technology world tend not to be traditionally religious, whereas in rural Ethiopia, most people are heavily Ethiopian Orthodox, 30% Muslim, and these guys are very ready to embrace AI helping solve their practical problems. They sort of, on religious grounds, don't believe that AIs are ever going to become really as like creative, imaginative, or general purpose intelligence as human beings. And I'm not really in the business of trying to unconvert people from their religion or trying to convince them an AI is going to have a soul or something, right? Right. But the practical applications of AI are really almost a universal language now, and everyone can relate. No matter where you go, they can see AI is going to solve a lot of problems. It's going to transform the world, and they can also see it's going to be better if the AI is owned and controlled in a decentralized way. Like the question of who owns the future really resonates with everyone, right? Because they don't want like an AI colonialism, right? They want AI that they can participate on and they can see some of the rewards from. And so this aspect of it resonates very well also.
Tell me something about you. What is something you do every day that's just non-negotiable that allows you to keep being who you are and stay productive?
I mean, I'm very sort of nature-oriented and very family-oriented at this particular phase of my life, because my wife and I had a baby 16 months ago, right? So I mean, when I'm home in Hong Kong, which is, to be fair, about 40% of the time lately, I've been traveling constantly. I mean, every morning I get up and with my 16-month-old baby son, I mean, we go walk on a trail through the woods. We go play in the water we live near the ocean, play with the starfish, watch the flying fish jump up and down. There's like free range cows wandering around and wild pigs and monkeys and so on. So yeah, to me, being grounded in nature every day is highly mental peace inducing. And being engaged in nature with a little baby is also very interesting, because the baby is like they're one with the moment that they're in, right? Like if you're out there splashing in the water with the starfish and the baby, like that's the whole universe at that moment. So most mornings I try to meditate 15 or 20 minutes also. So I mean, we have a rooftop balcony, you have a beautiful view of the ocean and the mountains. It's right near the sea. It's very fresh air. So that's, again, being outdoors in nature. And I think this is an important aspect, because to me, it's important to be open to all forms of life and intelligence, right? So you've got humanity, and you've got superhuman minds that we're trying to build in robots. You also have plants and starfish and cows and monkeys. And I mean, the attitude of wanting to foster connectivity of all sentient beings is quite important. If we can get that attitude into our super AIs, we're going to be a lot better off.
Yeah, I totally agree. What if I was to ask a bunch of your friends, what is Ben's superpower? Like, how are you able to do everything that you do? What is that thing about you?
Well, that would really be better to ask my friends than to.
What do you think they would say?
I mean,
I'm sure there are better programmers out there than you.
Yeah, probably just 2 or 3. But I'd say what my wife is often perplexed by is that no matter what's going on, even if I'm really overtired or waiting in line at the airport, or there's a lot of noise around, or annoying things are happening, I have the ability to focus completely on whatever I want to focus on. And I'm driven by abstractions, right? Like I never lose track of complete focus on whatever high-level abstract ideas I want to be focusing on. And I'm perplexed by the way people cannot focus in on whatever they want to focus on. And I'm perplexed by people who don't model things in the most abstract possible way that makes sense, but only focus on the complex details. So I'd say if there's some peculiar thing that characterizes me, it's I'm driven by total focus on certain abstractions and then how they ground themselves out in the particular things I'm doing. Whereas most people I see have a short attention span and a hard time focusing on things, and also are driven by very particular short-term situations, which I think has always felt strange to me for some reason. But I saw that, like, my kids are all great, but they all had trouble with attentional focus on what they wanted. And they're always asking me for advice, like, hey, how do you just narrow focus on whatever you want at each point in time? And I don't know. I think one thing about me that no one believes is I'm fundamentally a very introverted person, and it's by great force of mental effort that I'm going around and interfacing with people as much of my time as I am now, because I realize at a certain point, if I want to achieve my goals of creating general intelligence and, you know, spreading benevolent AI around the world, then the most rational thing to do is not sit at home and do math and programming, but rather it's, you know, building businesses and doing interviews and recruiting new people into projects. So I've forced myself to be extrovert in practice, but my closest friends would tell you I'm actually quite introverted in my core.
That makes sense. That's probably why you're able to get so much done as well.
Yeah, perhaps. Introverts are better at focus, I think.
Yeah. I think so. What was the best day of your life and the worst day of your life?
Best day of my life? Probably watching my first son be born, I guess. Yeah. I mean, all my kids, watching them be born was very moving. And with my second and third babies, I delivered the baby myself, which was amazing. But the first kid, just because it's the first, has a certain special amazement to it. That, like, you've created this human, right? Worst day of my life? When my oldest son was 4 years old, we had a car accident and his skull was fractured. I didn't know if he was going to live or die. Wow. So these are very, I guess, human experiences rather than AI experiences. I guess creating the singularity may be even better than all these things, right?
Yeah, but with the singularity, maybe you'll never experience those things again.
Yeah, well, but there will be all sorts of new things to experience. I mean, I'm not interested in rolling backwards, right? Like I would say, having my first kid was probably more amazing than having other kids will be. But you know, I'm married now for the third time, and I would say the amount of joy from that relationship is more than I experienced in any previous relationship, right? So that's something new, right? Which is like, wow, a marriage can be happy and loving rather than like tortured and complicated. So that's a new experience. So there's, you know, when you have a robot that can really understand everything you're saying and become your best friend, like being truly best friends with like an IU relationship and a mutual compassion, love, and understanding within the AI system that I myself have helped create and teach. I mean, that's going to be an amazing personal experience, right? And that's part of the path to the singularity. But yet that's a very intimate human experience, right? Can you imagine like really having a best friend who's an AI? That would be amazingly cool.
Like that movie Her, where that was his girlfriend, kind of.
Yeah, but that was a bit twisted, right?
Yeah.
So that, I mean, because that's like a twisted one-way love relationship or something.
But something that would, no, I can imagine that. It could be really cool.
Yeah.
Someone who is witty and knows you, it can challenge you as a friend, but is actually an AI.
It can be a very, very amazing experience, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well said. What scares you?
What scares me? Mostly, well, dying still scares me. Not as much as it did 20 years ago. I mean, I think, again, being human, having kids and grandchildren gives you more of a feeling like whatever, you're just part of this overall process of humanity and life. But on the other hand, I would much rather not be dead. I enjoy living, right? I can't be that paranoid about it because I do rock climbing and bungee jumping and a lot of high-risk things. But dying is bad, and I think no one should have to involuntarily die. In terms of broader issues, I mean, if I look at the leaders of most countries now, and if I look at how large corporations are operating, I mean, as we've already discussed, the idea that the first superhuman machine could be, say, a soldier who's loyal to Donald Trump, or like a Wall Street trader loyal to Goldman Sachs, right? I think if the first AGI with human level intelligence has this sort of mentality, this is not going to be a good thing. I'm happy with the US government and Goldman Sachs continuing to exist and do their thing. They're both beneficial in some ways. But if the first AGI is like an outgrowth of some organization with a narrow goal, like preserve this country or maximize shareholder value of this company, in the end, in the big picture, it may not matter because the superintelligence will go beyond humanity and go its own way anyway. But that could lead to a situation where, like, me and all my kids and you and your kids, we're all sort of turned into extra processing material for the super AI, which I don't want to be the case. Like, if we're merging the super AI, it should be by a joyous experience of our minds blending in with the superhuman intelligence. It shouldn't be by having our molecules disassembled and turned into computronium to fuel the AI's hard drive.
Right. No, that's well said. What would we be surprised to learn about you, Ben? Something you do in your spare time, or some guilty pleasure, or something?
I've been sufficiently open with my life. There's probably not much that's a big secret at this point in time. I mean, I play the piano every day.
Really?
I think mostly just improvising, but I compose a lot as well. Okay. But I've played the piano on stage before too. It shouldn't be incredibly surprising. I mean, I think honestly, my daily life is probably more routine and less interesting than most people would speculate. Like, I mean, we live in, it's a pretty nice village house in Hong Kong, but it's not like a mansion or something. And I mean, I live with my wife and baby, and eat meals at home and go walking around our village and play in the playground with the baby, and it's fairly matter-of-fact life in a little rural village. Now, what I'm doing when I sit down at the computer in my study is atypically interesting, right? But there's no like castle of crypto anarchy where we're sitting around all day served by humanoid Sophia robots or something, right?
Okay, it doesn't look like that.
Not yet. Maybe next year. We're working on it.
Okay.
Right?
What keeps you awake at night?
The baby.
Yeah?
He wakes up in the middle of the night and...
Nothing else? Nothing else is on your mind?
No, I'm a pretty peaceful-minded person, I think. I'm usually pretty happy just by my natural psychophysiology. Nothing keeps me awake at night in the sense of worries. I really feel very, very fortunate. I have a great, loving family, and I'm working on stuff I enjoy every day. And I have a sense of optimism about the technologies that we're building and the good that they're going to do. And I would say, if I think about it rationally, I have to say we have no idea what's going to happen when we create superhuman AIs. On a rational basis, the data we have does not determine what's going to occur, right? On the other hand, in terms of a spiritual sense or an underlying gut feeling, I mean, my feeling is things are going to come out amazingly well. You know, we're going to look back on 2019 as an era of like unimaginable ignorance, isolation, and suffering. And we're going to be in a much more joyous realm of experience after technologies let us overcome, you know, the limitations that we now have in our physical and mental lives.
Wouldn't that be incredible? Ben, I always ask people a few questions at the end. I'm going to ask you, if you could pick up a phone and call up the 20-year-old Ben Goertzel and give that young man some advice. I guess you're at Temple.
Is that buy Microsoft stock? I don't know.
Yeah. Besides stock picks, what would you tell him based on what you know now?
That's a subtle question, because the question is, do I tell him to break up with his girlfriend who became my first wife? I had 3 kids with her, but it was a horrible marriage. So, but I don't want to de-exist my first 3 kids either. So
there you go.
I mean, certainly, you could tell him to invent blockchain would be interesting, right? That's something where there's a lot of money, and it's a very, very simple technical idea, which would be easy to communicate. It's not a stock pick. It would make you rich, and it would also launch a technology revolution much sooner than has happened, right? Because there's a lot of things about AI that would be interesting to transmit, but those would be a very long conversation. There's a lot of subtlety and complexity, but it would certainly be worth transmitting that, like, multi-layer perceptrons, which were what deep neural networks were called back then. If you implement them on GPUs, we'll be able to solve face recognition and go, right? That'll be an interesting little tidbit, because those algorithms were well known back then,
right,
but no one quite knew that just accelerating them on GPU hardware would lead to such an incredible boost of performance. So there's some bits and pieces of technical knowledge which, if told to someone, you know, in the 1980s who would listen, would have made certain aspects of technology develop decades earlier than happened, which would be quite interesting.
Low bandwidth, high impact. Right?
Yeah. Tell them to try DMT also.
Earlier than
yeah.
Have your psychedelic experiences taught you a lot about the future, consciousness?
Certainly, my psychedelic experiences helped me to understand how the mind works much better than I would have otherwise, and also give me a whole different perspective on life, the universe, and everything. I think I ended up much less of a hardcore rationalist materialist than I was before I started on psychedelics. And I did start at age like 15 or something, so I've been at it a while.
With what, the DMT or
acid?
Acid, okay.
Yeah. There was a lot of acid where I went to college.
Okay, in Temple or in Oregon?
No, it was in Western Massachusetts. I went to a place called Simon's Rock College, which is part of Bard College.
Oh, Bard, right, yeah.
But that was, I mean, certainly, that was well before I was 20. I'd tripped on a lot of different psychedelics, and you do get the clear sense there that human understanding and the reality that we think is the be-all and end-all is a very limited portion of the total mega-universe, or whatever you want to call it. And I'd sort of had that inkling earlier, because I was meditating a lot as a kid from having read a bunch of my mother's books on Chinese culture and Buddhism, and then I read Uspensky's Russian mysticism and so on. So through meditation, I'd already started to get into states of consciousness that made me doubt, like, the absolute reality of myself or the 4D space-time continuum. But psychedelics definitely drove the point home, right?
And probably had something to do with your vision of today, to a certain extent.
Well, certainly. It's very hard to go back and say, what would you think if you hadn't had this or that experience, right? Because if I hadn't done psychedelics, I might have gotten deeper into meditation, because I'd already had the idea to from early study of Buddhism to like quest beyond our conventional understanding of what's real and what isn't. But yeah, I think psychedelics gave me a lot of insight into the nature of the mind and, you know, how different aspects of learning and reasoning work and how the mind builds up a reality to perceive, which has been important part of my whole AI quest in terms of architecting AI systems. I mean, a lot of it just comes out from nitty-gritty computer science and math, but high-level inspiration often comes from introspection into how does your own mind work, and psychedelics and meditation can be very, very helpful for that. I mean, I also think just in terms of coping with the craziness of being an entrepreneur in the cryptocurrency and AI markets and all the roller coaster ups and downs of life in the modern tech world, certainly getting both meditation and psychedelics and these and, you know, being in nature so much, these things give a certain grounding that lets one cope with all this madness that otherwise might just be too mind-blowing and drive you apeshit. Right?
Yeah, well said. Best advice you've ever received? Could have come from a coder or your parents or somebody out there.
My father is a sociology professor, and one time after another, when I'm interested in some question, or he's interested in some question, his first reaction is, well, let's dig up the data and look at it.
The following success secrets are only available inside the London Real Tribe, where you get exclusive access and insights from our high-performance guests on wealth creation, productivity, leadership, morning routines, health, and well-being. To join our tribe community, go to londonreal.tv/tribe. Now, let's continue with the show.
Last question to that 20-year-old that's watching us, listening to us right now. Advice to them. Based on all of this, the fact that the singularity is coming, what do you tell them?
There's no one path for everyone, obviously, and to give any one person useful advice, I have to know that person very well. So I think the most important thing to do is educate yourself on every level. Like learn as much as you can about science, math, and every advanced technology out there, and social science as well. Just learn more and more, ingest more information, and then at the same time, yeah, meditation is your friend. I mean, psychedelics used appropriately can be your friend. I mean, getting a deeper inner understanding and wisdom, as well as gathering as much knowledge as possible about technology and society is important. And having done these things for a few years, the right way to contribute to the singularity for you personally will become clear to you. And I certainly can't tell you it.
That's good advice, Ben. Ben, thanks so much for coming here and explaining sometimes stuff that's difficult to explain. But I think we did a pretty good job.
We've covered a lot of ground, and it's been a fun conversation. We're both still awake, so it's,
that's good. But
yeah.
you know, this is, like you said, it's a bit like we're the frog in the pot, because it's happening all around us.
That's right.
We're carrying these devices around. We're talking. AI changes our life all the time, and yet we kind of also fear this boogeyman moment or this sci-fi dystopia. But the truth is, it's coming, and it's like, how can we make it better? And I appreciate you challenging a lot of my views as to what that next level of evolution. And if we look back at 2019, like it was the Middle Ages, or like the days of Genghis Khan, when we were living like total barbarians, and we had no concept of human rights, but maybe that's the way this year looks 200 years from now.
I'm pretty sure eating meat will look that way.
Yeah.
As one example, or say, look at marriage as an institution where people will spend their lives in misery because, like, they took a vow 40 years before. I mean, there are many, many things in common life, or going to work every day to carry out repetitive tasks that you don't enjoy because that's the only way to get food and shelter. I mean, these are going to seem insanely barbaric a few decades from now, let alone hundreds of years from now.
It's exciting stuff. Well, Ben, all the best in your work. I hope you make sure we have a smooth transition into the singularity and you wrest it away from these advertisers.
Well, it's not
gamblers.
me. It's going to be participatory by vast numbers of people, including many people who are listening to us right now. And I mean, this is a key thing to understand about the singularity. Like, from a high level view, you could say, oh, it's happening, right? But actually, this happening is the collective effort of all of us on the planet, right? So for this to transition to the singularity, to come out in a beneficial way, I mean, this needs participation of vast numbers of people, and it needs creativity by vast numbers of people in figuring out the best way to help, right? And without that, the odds of a beneficial transition are much lower. And I mean, this is much of the reason I'm doing interviews like this, right? It's because I want people who are listening to this interview to start deeply thinking and to start learning and studying and to be figuring out, you know, how they can best contribute, just as I've done in my own life. And without that, it's going to be haphazard, and haphazard means the path to the singularity will be controlled by a few governments and large corporations, and it'll all come out in the wash in the end from like the cosmic evolution point of view. But from the little narrow point of view that wants human beings not to be squashed during the transition, like what each of us does in the interim is very important.
Yeah, powerful, man. Something for everyone to think about. All right, Ben, keep doing the good work.
All right.
Thanks so much for the time, man. I appreciate it.
Sure.